Both Koreas went on their highest alerts possible last week, and as you can tell, we're still here. While Greenpeace originally detected no harmful chemicals following the deadly Tianjin blast, that is no longer the case. Plus, China's land reclamation efforts aren't showing any signs of slowing down. Those stories are coming up next. This is the Asia Brief. Greetings and salutations, my excellent friends. Steve Miller here on this Monday, August 24th. Thank you so much for joining me. We're going to go ahead and kick things off today with an update from the Korean Peninsula. After the cross-border shelling incident last week, South Korea told its soldiers to be ready for anything. According to North Korea's central news agency, that stance was repeated in the DPRK, with its military being told to enter a wartime state Friday afternoon. The KCNA reported Kim Jong-un telling his troops that they should be fully battle-ready to launch surprise operations, while the entire front line should be placed on a semi-war state. That surprise operation? Well, Pyongyang says if Seoul doesn't halt the propaganda broadcast, they would take action. South Korea's Yonhap News reported that North Korea towed artillery into position to knock out those southern speakers. Yonhap News is also reporting, as of Sunday afternoon, 50 North Korean submarines had left their berths for naval operations, and 6 South Korean F-16 fighters have been recalled early from Alaskan exercises. The army and people of the DPRK are poised not to just counteract or make any retaliation, but not to rule out an all-out war to protect the social system, their own choice, at the risk of their lives, North Korea said in a statement carried by the country's official news agency. As I mentioned in Friday's special Asia Brief, this is the typical pattern of events we see with North Korea. They'll do something rash, Seoul will retaliate, Kim will threaten war, and the world goes nuts. This isn't the first time both Koreas have drawn a line in the sand, refusing to back down. You know what? It's not going to be the last. My litmus test for how serious things are has always been the availability of civilian tours to the DMZ. And this past weekend, tours were canceled, but are slated to resume their normal schedule in the Joint Security Area this week. As a precautionary measure, the United States and South Korea also temporarily halted their joint military exercises to coordinate responses to the latest threats and then also promptly resumed them. U.S. Department of State spokesman John Kirby said, quote, "We are concerned by the firing of a projectile into South Korea from the north. As we've said before, these kinds of provocative actions only heighten tensions, and we call on Pyongyang to refrain from actions and rhetoric that threaten regional peace and security." End quote. The fact that the war games quickly resumed is a good indicator that nothing happening at the border had significant impact beyond the immediate theater of operations. Bruce Bennett, senior analyst at the Rand Corporation, offered up a more somber view of the situation. Quote, "I think the key issue here is the potential for escalation. In trying to deter North Korea, the South Korean government is taking a very strong stance on how it will retaliate against future North Korean actions." End quote. The Mansfield Foundation's president and CEO, Frank Januzzi, noted the events fall into the typical rhythmic pattern from Pyongyang. And he's absolutely right. It's been some time since North Korea has essentially acted out. The danger isn't necessarily North Korea's actions, but rather how forceful Seoul's response will be. That's where things could get out of hand. Traditionally, armed responses from Seoul against the DPRK are measured and weak. Some speculate this is because the United States exerts pressure on South Korea. If Pak launched an overhanded counterattack, then Kim might think it's time to enact his endgame. South Korean National Security Advisor Kim Kwon-jin and Hwang Pyong-so, the North Korean military's top political officer, met Saturday in Panmunjom into the wee hours of Sunday morning without reaching an agreement on how to alleviate the current situation. Talk then resumed on Sunday with the addition of Hong Yong-pyo, Seoul's lead on Pyongyang, and his northern counterpart, Kim Yong-gong. At the time of this podcast recording, talks were still underway on Monday morning with no details being released. The landmine incident and this shelling could also be viewed as a test for South Korea, a way of measuring response levels from Seoul. Remember, we're expecting both a nuclear test and a long-range missile test sometime in the future, and how South Korea and the United States acts now could give Pyongyang important insights into the future. And that's exactly what Yonhap News noted. Quote, "The North is showing signs of shooting off a Scud missile near Wonsan and a Rodong missile in the North Pyongyang province." End quote. Some have even speculated North Korea will use family reunions as a chip in the negotiations to get the speakers turned off. The bottom line to remember is no one wants all-out war. Yes, from time to time there will be skirmishes, but it's in everyone's interest, especially Kim Jong-un's, to rein in responses. Chinese officials are reporting cyanide levels measuring more than 350 times the acceptable limit have been found in waters near the blast site in Tianjin, China. As alarming as this sounds, officials have reassured the public that the drinking water remains safe. Deng Xiaowan, director of Tianjin's Environmental Monitoring Center, said, quote, "At present, all cyanide-contaminated wastewaters are kept within the blast site. The water will not be drained until it's cleaned up." End quote. 6 of 16 testing areas outside the blast area also detected cyanide levels, but were within safety limits. The public, however, remains concerned, since pictures of dead fish have floated around the internet, and based on the images recorded during the blast, things are much worse than have been reported. Tianjin Mayor Huang Zhenggao told reporters about his plan to relocate chemicals, noting the new designated chemical district will be an equivalent to the design of Singapore's Jurong Island. The development of a public safety island will also be facilitated, a plan we've already activated. The notion of a special area isn't new, nor is it risk-free. Liu Yuhang, Secretary General of the Hazardous Chemical Logistics Branch under the China Federation of Logistics and Purchasing, shared that after such huge quantities of chemical products are put together in one special zone, we wonder if a bigger-than-expected chain reaction will be triggered should a small-scale accident occur. However, as with all things of this nature, tight security and professional management of such facilities are key to make sure things don't go bump in the night. And after a recent report where it was announced that 70 chemical firms failed safety inspections, it's clear China has a long way to go. Unfortunately, proof of that materialized Saturday night when another explosion rocked a chemical plant in the city of Zibo, located in China's Shandong province. At the recording of this podcast, at least 8 have been injured, with no deaths reported at this time. According to the BBC, the plant contains a chemical used in the production of nylon and is harmful to the skin. The city serves as a major storage site for oil and other chemicals in the region, and again demonstrates the dangers of putting all of one's eggs in one basket. A new report by the U.S. Defense Department on China's land reclamation efforts in the South China Sea reveals Beijing has reclaimed more land in the Spratly Islands than previously known. China started its land reclamation efforts in December of 2013 and now has reclaimed land at 7 of its 8 Spratly outposts. The Asia-Pacific Marine Security Strategy Report notes this is 17 times more land completed in just 2 short years than all other claimants combined in the past 40 years, despite China's insistence it ceased operations in June. David Shear, the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Asian and Pacific Security Affairs, said, quote, "It's not clear to us that they have stopped or if they are finishing up." End quote. He noted the United States will continue to watch that situation very closely and engage with China. In the report, the Pentagon notes Beijing is completing work on an airstrip on the Fiery Cross Reef. Once complete, it would allow China to use the facility as an alternative for carrier-based airplanes, allowing its military to conduct sustained operations with aircraft carriers in the area. U.S. Defense Secretary Ash Carter said Thursday of this past week the United States will continue to fly, sail, and operate wherever international law permits. Unfortunately, as the United States and ASEAN members try to resolve this situation through diplomatic and legal channels, China has shown no signs of changing its view of what it claims as its sovereign territory. That being the case, Beijing continues to strengthen its position and may be approaching a point where it will be nigh impossible to remove them. Well, my friends, those are today's stories, and I hope you'll let me know your thoughts by sharing them in the comments on Facebook or Twitter. The Asia Brief is a special feature of the Asia News Weekly podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, please share it with your friends, and if you haven't, subscribe. Subscribing is free, and when you do, the next episode is delivered automatically to you. You can subscribe on our website, asianewsweekly.net, or in your favorite podcast application. You can also keep up with more news from the region by following Asia News Weekly on Facebook or Twitter. And if you have any comments, questions, or feedback, be sure to drop us a line. That email address is podcast@asianewsweekly.net. Thank you so much for joining me, and until next time, remember to be true to yourself and to always be awesome.